What is going on today, you guys? Today we're talking about how to prioritize your time in order to become better at your musical instrument and to achieve your musical goals. Let's get right into it. As we all know, it's really easy to get distracted in the modern world. We're constantly on our phones, we're constantly on Instagram, Facebook, we're constantly on YouTube, and there's all these things all the time that are happening to distract us. Whether it's all the dishes we have to do in the sink, whether it's our car breaking down, whether it's our bike or motorcycle breaking down, anything happening that is taking your time away from your goals, there's all these distractions happening all the time. So, in order to eliminate these distractions, or at least to make sure that they're not inhibiting on your goals, we have to prioritize our time. And I personally this week have been reading this book by Chase Jarvis called Creative Calling. It just came out a few weeks ago, and this book really inspired me to start writing out my entire schedule by the hour or even by 30-minute increments. So I've been scheduling in every time I need to eat, every time I need to practice, every class I need to go to, even what shows I'm going to that night or my gigs I have that night. So I've been doing all these things as an experiment this week and trying to figure out the best way to make sure that I practice every day and make sure that I'm not wasting a ton of time on Instagram or YouTube or whatever I might be doing. Let's talk about how you might be able to get into this. So going back to this great book by Chase Jarvis, Creative Calling, I was reading a chapter this week that started off with this great quote by Dwight D. Eisenhower that said, "What is urgent is rarely important, and what is important is rarely urgent." And this is really, really deep. Because usually the main goals we have, like personally, I want to become a great musician. I want to be able to share my music with people and play music at the highest level I possibly can. And this takes a really long time. Practicing my instrument is definitely not urgent, but things that are urgent are almost never important. Like if my car breaks down. In the grand scheme of things, it's not really that important. It's not really going to have a huge impact on my life. Doing the dishes that are stacking up in the sink is not very important, but it might be pretty urgent because I'm running out of things to eat with. And yeah, the list goes on and on. There's all these little things that are kind of mundane, but might seem really urgent in your life. And once again, often these aren't very important. So this is the main idea of this chapter in this book, and it really got me starting to think. So Mr. Jarvis had a great example of this idea with the great writer and poet Maya Angelou. So I came up with my own example with John Coltrane, one of my favorite jazz artists and one of the best jazz artists of all time. So pretend you traveled back in time to 1963 or 64 when John Coltrane was formulating his ideas for A Love Supreme, writing out the motifs for this incredible album, coming up with all of his ideas, and having all these great spiritual revelations that really guided his music into creating some of the best jazz records of all time, like A Love Supreme. So pretend you ran into the great John Coltrane in this year, and he came up to you and he started talking about how he doesn't have time to work on his album today because he has to do all the dishes, he has to file his taxes, he has to repair his car that's broken down, etc., etc. You would say, "Mr. Coltrane, excuse me, but please work on A Love Supreme. This is going to be one of the greatest jazz records of all time. It's going to be incredibly important to culture, it's going to be incredibly important to music, and it's going to be one of the best-selling jazz records of all time. This is one of the most important things you'll ever do in your life." But of course, Mr. Coltrane did not know that in the moment, because no one can read into the future. So anyways, this is a really interesting perspective to start looking at for your own work. And do you really want to prioritize your time to be doing things like dishes, taxes, when you might be wasting time, when you could be practicing your instrument, coming up with your next great creative idea that really could make a difference in your life or in other people's lives, like John Coltrane? This is a really interesting thing to be thinking about, and this is one of the main reasons that I started prioritizing my schedule this week. And although this idea came to me as an incredible revelation this week, we all do have to take this with a grain of salt, because we can't only play music all the time, or we can't only do our creative projects all the time. We have to shower, we have to brush our teeth, we have to eat. So we do have to make time for these other things, but it's all about priority and balance. So, for instance, if your mom asks you to do the dishes, sometimes it is very, very inconvenient to do that if you're trying to work on your music, if you have all these creative projects. But if you explain this to her, she might get it, she might not. But if she doesn't get it, you might have to prioritize your time to do the dishes, but it doesn't mean that you just won't do the dishes altogether. That's a totally different thing, and that starts to get into ego and selfishness and all that. and we definitely want to avoid that. We just want to have priorities. We want to have our own goals set in stone to the point where we can prioritize our time in order to try to achieve those goals, to try to practice your instrument more, to try to record that album. It's all about prioritizing your time this week. So what I recommend you do if you're trying to figure out these priorities in your own life is write down very, very clear priorities. I've done this with myself, and my clear priorities are practicing my instrument, making one video every week, and getting my schoolwork done at the end of the day, but the two first ones are the main ones. And this is really important because it'll help you prioritize your own time. And I recommend also writing it down. You could also do it in the schedule in your phone, but try to write something concrete down so that you try to follow this. And this may not work for everybody. I don't even know if it's gonna work for me, but I'm gonna try it for a few weeks and see what I think. So once again, just one of my ideas this week. I highly recommend you read the book Creative Calling by Chase Jarvis that I'm talking about today. It just came out a few weeks ago, so jump on it and go grab it. He's a really interesting person. He has a lot of interesting ideas for creativity and productivity and all these different things that are really interesting to me. So maybe they'll be interesting to you as well. So thank you guys so much again for watching today. And if you're enjoying my videos, I'd really appreciate it if you go down below and check out some of my other videos. And if you're enjoying those, please subscribe to the channel. It would really mean a lot to me and it would help me out a ton. Thanks so much, guys, and I hope you have a great day.